Joining me now is State Senator Jim Hendren, independent from Gravette, Arkansas, in the Arkansas State Senate. Senator Hendren, thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Roby. It's good to be here.
Let's talk about your switch from you're leaving the Republican Party. You said in a very dramatic statement and video to become an independent. Tell me why.
I think it's the way I can best serve Arkansas. I think there's the Republican Party I still love. There's great people in the party. And I know there's a lot of people working hard to right the ship. But for me, I just feel like the work that I need to do in Arkansas, it's going to be easier for me to do that from an independent platform, not bound to either party.
You obviously had some big beefs with the direction the Republican Party has gone over the last few years. Kind of maybe outline for some of our viewers and listeners what some of your most problematic areas were.
Well, Roby, I don't think it's been any secret that I've been frustrated with the tone of politics for some time. In fact, I think a few years ago, you had me on to talk about a program I did called Shot Val, where I evaluated scorecards that are created to basically push legislators to extremes. During this last election, I got involved by trying to call out some mail pieces that I thought were disingenuous, if not dishonest, again, trying to push people to extremes. And so what I've seen in both parties really is a structure that's gotten more and more extreme and left more and more people without a voice. So that's where I feel like, especially as I've talked to my 4 grown children, they don't feel at home in the Republican Party like I felt at home when I was their age in the party of Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. They don't have that sense of home because of what the party's become, primarily with its tone, with its incivility, and with what we've seen with regard to the election and all the things. I just think it's time for us to begin to build a home for people in the center who just feel left out.
One of the things that you're doing with this move to disavow your previous party affiliation and to assume this independent status is you formed some sort of group called Common Ground Arkansas. Is this a not-for-profit? Is this a 501c4? What's your vision for this?
Well, we're going to roll out the specifics of that in a couple of weeks. The lawyers are still working on the mechanics of it. It will have a structure similar to one of those you've mentioned. And again, depending on what the lawyers tell us we can do, we want to make sure we comply with all the laws, but we want to be effective. And the purpose of Common Ground is, again, to try to provide tools and support for candidates and for elected officials who have that desire to find common ground, to work together, to work across the aisle. I just believe that's what makes government work. And right now, there is no pressure from the center. All the pressure is from the extremes. Common Ground is going to be an organization that comes to try to encourage and support candidates who want to work across the aisle for the good of Arkansas.
So vaguely, because you are going to roll out more details, but you envision something that will perhaps be a place for candidate recruitment, or at least a place for candidates to congregate, policy, potential money, whether that's a PAC or whatever. That's basically what you're envisioning.
It'll be that and more. I think I'll be announcing some of the people that are going to be supporting in this, and it's going to be a credible group, and it's going to be a group that understands how Arkansas politics work and has seen the same transformation that I have observed over the last 20 years and understands the need to bring some civility, some professionalism, some decency back to Arkansas politics. So we're working again on the structure and the details, but all those things you mentioned, and I think even more.
So, us reporters, we like to try to push things further along that we can. So this begs the question, you have been rumored, you've even talked openly about weighing a potential gubernatorial bid in 2022. Could this be the vehicle for doing this? Are you looking at running for governor as an independent?
Not right now. Here's what I will say is I think it makes it pretty clear I'm not going to run in a Republican primary since I just became an independent. But right now, I've kind of pushed that decision to the back burner because before anybody can win any serious race as an independent, there has to be some sort of platform, some sort of foundation. And I'm telling you, there is a hunger for that in Arkansas. 2020 polling shows almost as many people identify as independents as Democrats, and within 10% of Republicans. And there's no place for those people to identify and to feel like they're at home. So we're going to build the organization. We're going to build the structure. And then we'll worry on down the road whether or not that is a vehicle that I or somebody else could use, not just for a gubernatorial race, but for an attorney general race or for any number of statewide races, but especially for legislative races. That's where I guess I see the biggest concern I have in Arkansas politics right now is I have seen the extreme, almost radicalization of the legislature compared to what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And, we don't have that. That's not indicative of the Arkansas people. When you look at the governors that we've elected, from Winthrop Rockefeller to Mike Beebe to Asa Hutchinson, we tend to elect centrist, problem-solving people, but yet our legislature has been polarized to the point where it's not reflective of what Arkansas is.
Tell me how this party change, this move to independent, is going to affect your status in the Arkansas State Senate. As you know, and everybody else that watches this probably knows, the Republicans have a supermajority in both the Senate and the House. Does this change the working dynamic for you in terms of you won't necessarily be caucusing with the Republicans and working on some similar agenda items?
It does. And I've had people ask me that. And I think of Representative Adam Kinzinger, who says, look, I understand the consequences of my decisions, and I'm willing to accept that. And that's the way I look at it. Part of the problem that I see in Arkansas politics is this continue to move to avoid to work across party lines. And if I'm not part of the Republican Party and there is this partisanship, it does make me perhaps less effective when it comes to passing specific or controversial legislation. Now, again, I'll say I've run the gamut. I've been president pro tem, where I've run some very heavy pieces of legislation, and I've gotten the opportunity to do those things. But I have also seen the change in the legislature. So I will tell you that I still believe the majority of the people in the Arkansas Senate are going to vote for a piece of legislation if it's good legislation, even if it's brought by an independent or a Democrat. Not all, and some are absolutely not going to do it just because of that fact, and that's part of the problem.
Have you talked to any of your other legislative colleagues? Are they perhaps feeling the same way that you are? Might we see you starting a trend of some other moderate Republicans or some conservative Democrats moving to this independent label?
I think it's possible. I've had conversations in general with people. And again, I think you'll hear some announcements of some folks that'll be working on this in the future. But yeah, I do think that's possible. I want to be clear. We're not just going to work for election of independent candidates. There are good Republicans and there are good Democrats. And what I'm interested in, and I think what Common Ground Arkansas is going to be interested in, is electing good people who care about Arkansas more than being pushed to the extreme to satisfy a primary challenge.
Let's talk about two pieces of legislation that you've been pretty instrumental with this session so far, and they're both on pause right now. I'm just curious as to where you see them going now. Hate crimes legislation, will you still be the lead on that? What's the status of it? When do you think it will roll?
I've said all along, this is not, to me, what's important is not who's the first name on the bill or who presents the bill in committee. What's important is that Arkansas passed hate crimes legislation. And if there's a better person to do that, particularly because of the change that I'm making with party affiliation, I 100% support that and will do whatever is necessary, because I believe in the policy. I believe Arkansas needs to show that we are not a state that refuses to punish hate like the other 47 states do. So I do think there's still discussions, there's still talks about some potential other versions or amendments. All those discussions are going to happen. Anytime there's a bill that has as much back pressure as hate crimes does, you don't see it run early in the session. It'll be later in the session. I still have hope. I've said from the beginning, it's going to be a heavy lift. I'll play whatever role is necessary to try to help get that across the finish line, because it's the right thing to do.
I'm still wonky enough to remember when the legislature dealt with issues like the taxes and the budget. And so I got a tax question for you. You've been championing the EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit proposal. I think Representative Joe Jett at the House Revenue and Tax Committee has a low income tax relief bill out there. Senator Jonathan Dismang, head of the Budget Committee, also in Revenue and Tax, says he's got something to play with brackets a little bit more. What's happening with tax policy behind the scenes? Because I think that y'all are all talking to each other.
We are, and again, there's Senator Wallace also has an EITC bill. There's lots of different ideas out there. As you know, I spent 2 years chairing the Tax Reform and Relief Task Force. We spent a lot of time comparing Arkansas's tax code to other states. And here's what I came away with that. While we have a high rate and that made us non-competitive, and we've begun to work on lowering that, we also have one of the most regressive tax codes because of our high sales tax rates that really hits low income people hard. And so there's a balance. You can't just focus on one without the other, because in many ways you raise people's income and give them more opportunity as we become more competitive to attract businesses to the state. That's why I like the EITC. It's the most effective way to help working families get a leg up, especially for their moms with 2 or 3 kids. It's been proven by state after state that this is a very effective way to target low-income working families. I pay for it with tobacco tax and vaping tax, because right now the taxpayers are getting reamed by about $400 million a year because of healthcare costs associated with those activities. But regardless, all of those discussions are still going to be happening. I do think this is one of those things that common ground needs to start. We need to start looking for common ground and solutions, because we tend to focus on the shiny things that don't get a lot of difference, whether it be stand your ground or abortion bills or gun bills. We got to start focusing on these things that affect people's paychecks and their ability to get and keep jobs in Arkansas.
All right. He is State Senator Jim Hendren. He's an independent from Gravette, Arkansas. We will see you at the Capitol when the weather allows us. Thank you for being with us, Senator.
Thanks for having us, Roby.